My name is Dr. Henry Mahncke, and I'm the Vice President of Research and Outcomes here at Posit Science. And what I do for this organization is I work very closely with Dr. Michael Mahncke, who you've just heard, to organize all of the scientific content of our programs and organize all of the clinical validation of our programs. What Dr. Mahncke and I work on together is building everything about these programs in terms of what you see and what you listen to from a scientific perspective, and then testing them in collaboration with leading academics and researchers and clinicians from around the world to make sure that we fully understand who these kinds of programs can help, how they help those people, how much they help them, and in what ways they help them. So you've just heard Dr. Mahncke talk about the basic science of brain plasticity, and now here at Posit Science we've built a program on these fundamental principles of brain function that can improve memory and cognition by fundamentally improving brain performance. What I'm going to talk a bit about now is the design principles of this program, and I hope that it helps explain more about how this program works, why it looks the way it does, why it feels the way it does when you do it. So to start off, I'd like to talk a little bit about the people who came together to build this training program. It's an amazing time to be a scientific researcher in the field of memory and thinking and aging. I think everyone has now heard of the notion of use it or lose it. Everyone knows that there's something that can be done in terms of what we do each day to help our brains stay active and vital and strong throughout life. However, the challenge to scientists and researchers in this field has been to say, well, exactly what do we mean by use it? What do we exactly have to do to use it to avoid losing it? 10 years ago, if you talked to people in the field of memory and thinking and aging, what they would have said is, there's really not much that can be done. The brain, as we age, is simply wearing out. But now, as you know, if you talk to doctors or researchers in this field, there's been a sea change, a revolution in how people view this problem. And everyone now knows that something can be done. And that makes it an incredibly exciting time to do this kind of work at Posit Science and do this kind of work with our collaborators, because as Dr. Mahncke began to talk to his colleagues about the idea of building something that would be genuinely useful, that would be truly shown to be helpful to memory and cognition in people, almost everyone that he turned to, his colleagues at the university he worked at and his colleagues around the world, talked to him and said, yes, I'd love to help. I would like to take the research that I've been working on for all these years and turn it into something that would be a program that could really be brought out into the world to achieve these goals of improving memory and cognition. So the training program that you're about to begin was built not only by us here at Posit Science, but has been contributed to by tens of basic scientists and neurobiologists, psychologists, of clinicians, neurologists, and gerontologists from around the world. And we've brought together this global team of scientists to make sure that the training program that you're about to begin employs the best methods that have been come up with from around the US and around the world to achieve its goals. What you're about to begin, the training program that you're about to begin, is focused on listening. And we chose listening as an initial area to focus our research and our development efforts, because listening is the most important means of communication for people. Right now you're learning the information that I'm talking about by listening. And the best way to enhance memory and cognition in people is to start with that sensory modality. So the kinds of exercises you're going to be doing are going to be focused very intently on how you hear things, and particularly on how you hear speech. The goals of this training program, as you go through it, are to specifically enhance your memory for speech and the things that you hear, and your ability to hear speech clearly and then act on it. And what I mean by that is that when we designed this program, our explicit goal was to help people do things like, when you're about to go out to the store and a friend of yours or your spouse asks you to remember 6 or 8 things to get at the store, we want your brain to be tuned up so that when your friend or your spouse says those words to you, your brain receives them more accurately in the first place, stores them more strongly in memory, so that when you get to the store and you're trying to remember those things, they're easier to find in memory, so you can actually go ahead and make those purchases you've been asked to. So that's a simple example, but we think that the kinds of benefits that a person should get from this training program extend broadly to all kinds of memory and action that's guided by this most fundamental and important form of human communication, of speech. So how does this training program do this? Well, this program isn't like a lot of other things that you may have come across. It's not a bunch of strategies about how to remember things. We're not teaching people a trick to help their memory. What this training program does is it is aimed at fundamentally improving the way the brain processes speech information and then stores it in memory and then reads it out. One way to think about this is to think about the parts of your brain that process speech and language as a pipe. And words that come in through your ear have to go through this pipe to eventually be stored in memory and then read out later. And as people get older, in a way, this pipe becomes narrower and slightly congested, so that the words that are coming in that you're hearing don't get represented as accurately or as strongly. You can imagine the water flowing through this pipe is slowed down and has eddies and currents and doesn't come out the other side quite as strongly. And that's why it becomes more difficult to remember things accurately and to do the things that you are trying to remember. What this program does, in a sense, is take that pipe and really scour it out so that all the words that are coming in through a person's ears get through that pipe clearly and accurately and quickly into the brain's memory systems where they can be stored to guide future actions. The way the program actually does that scouring, so to speak, is it's a collection of 6 different training exercises that have been carefully picked and designed on scientific principles around brain plasticity and around hearing and around language to achieve that cleaning out of the pipe. Now, a lot of people ask when they go through this program, shouldn't this feel like memory training? Why aren't I feel like I should be asked to remember things all the time, and that's how my memory gets stronger. Scientifically, actually, the best way to strengthen memory isn't just to try and remember things. One way to think about this is to think about how a basketball team practices. The way NBA teams get ready to win championships isn't just by coming into the court and playing basketball 8 hours a day to get better at it. The way a team gets better at basketball is coaches have broken down the game of basketball into all of its tiniest constituent parts. People who come into practice start off by stretching, and then they do things like dribbling practice, right? Or they do weight training to make themselves stronger. And then they do things that are like pieces of basketball. People practice free throws, or they practice running up and down the court. And finally, at the end, they practice specific scrimmages, offense against defense. The training program that we've developed works in a very similar way to help the brain process and store speech information better. What you'll find as you do it is that there's this series of 6 exercises which have been designed to fundamentally break down the process of listening and storing speech information. You'll start off with exercises that aren't even really speech information at all. They're very simple acoustic listening exercises. You hear simple sounds and be asked to judge which ones are which and which order they come on. You'll then go on to exercises that use very short pieces of speech, what we call phonemes or syllables, and we retrain the brain to process these very short fundamental building blocks of speech accurately. And then you'll move on to exercises where you'll listen to and remember and act on continuous speech, entire sentences or entire short stories. And by designing this whole spectrum of exercises, from the very simple sounds to the very complex full sentences in speech, we completely exercise the brain's speech and language and memory systems, just like that basketball team does, so that when you get out into the real world and are working to remember things or to hear things clearly in the first place, that whole process in your brain will work better automatically the first time and effortlessly. So that's what we hope and believe that people will end up with after going through this training program. Now, in addition to all of these listening exercises, as I talked about, a very important feature of learning and memory in the brain is the brain's ability to pay attention to things, the brain's ability to notice when something is new, and the brain's ability to be rewarded by things that are fun and interesting. I think all of us have been in classroom situations where we haven't learned anything because we've been bored and it seemed like nothing new is happening, and we don't really feel like we're getting out of it. The training program that we've built is designed to really exercise all of those systems in the brain as well. The brain's attention system, the brain systems that detect new and interesting things, the brain systems that deal with reward and reinforcement. And by exercising all of those systems, we hope to really reinvigorate the entire process of learning and memory in the brain as well. And it's that reinvigoration in combination with the specific exercises for listening that occur that together work together to really enhance the brain's ability to process speech and then to remember and act upon it. With that in mind, I hope that this has given you a first overview to how we designed this